BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays this year I've been doing a regular segment about Jack the Ripper. Over the past 2.5 years, I've done a handful of episodes on the Ripper case, which is perhaps the world's most famous unsolved mystery. They came out here and there, but I talked about the victims, I talked about the letters, and now it's finally time to talk about the suspects in the Jack the Ripper case. And there's one suspect that I wanted to address in particular, and his name is David Cohen, also known as Nathan Kaminsky. And there are two reasons why I wanted to do this episode. The first is that one of you guys requested it in the comments section a while back, so big thank you. And as you see, this is a requested topic from one of the listeners. If you're curious about any of the other Jack the Ripper suspects or possible ideas for another true crime case for the Anything Goes Friday segment, you can write your idea in the comments section down below. But also, I did an episode on Aaron Kosminski, who is perhaps one of the most famous Jack the Ripper suspects, but there appears to be some type of confusion, even to this day, about Aaron Kosminski, or David Cohen, who's also known as Nathan Kaminsky, Kosminski, or Kaminsky, and I simply wanted to look into this more, and as you see, I'm somewhat of a newcomer to the Jack the Ripper case. I mean, reading up on Jack the Ripper casually here and there over the last 2.5 years hardly puts me in the category of a ripperologist, so instead, I hope that people will understand that these episodes are coming out as a new take on the subject, a fresh set of eyes looking at the world's most famous unsolved murder case. And if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions, I invite you to hit the like button, subscribe. It really helps out the channel. You can also go over to social media pages, share with your friends and family. If you know anyone who is curious about true crime cases, the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and any subject is welcome on the Friday show. And also, I do a regular segment about JonBenet Ramsey, which comes out every weekend. Share with your friends and family on social media. And you can also visit BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88. That allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. So, firstly, I'm going to be referring to this suspect as Nathan Kaminsky throughout the episode. It appears that he was known by more than one name, and the other name was David Cohen, but even from a brief reading on the subject, it appears that David Cohen was just a generic name for a Jewish person, the way that people would use the name John Doe for an unidentified person, and I will be referring to him as Nathan Kaminsky. So, Jack the Ripper was a serial killer and a spree killer who operated in 1888. The first crime was committed on August 31st with the murder of Polly Nichols. The final crime was committed on November 9th of 1888 with the murder of Mary Kelly. 5 women were murdered. 4 out of the 5 women were mutilated. The one who was not was the third victim, Liz Stride, who had her throat slashed, but she was not mutilated in an extreme way like several of the other victims. Catherine Eddowes, the 4th victim, was the one who had her kidney cut out, and it's believed that the Ripper cut her kidney in half and mailed it in with the From Hell letter, one of the communications. So, firstly, to talk about Nathan Kaminsky, I would like to go over to JackTheRipperTour.com, and that website and YouTube channel has been, very, very commendable, simply for the fact that they are choosing to share so many different points of view about the Ripper case. But who was David Cohen, also known as Nathan Kaminsky? The theory that was put together pinning the chilling Whitechapel murders on Nathan Kaminsky claims that the name David Cohen was actually a John Doe identity given to him at the time. He was taken in and found stumbling through the streets of the East End of London in December of 1888, a few short months after the Autumn of Terror. It is claimed that Cohen's real name was Nathan Kaminsky, a Polish Jew that matched the description of the wanted man known as Leather Apron, who would later form the pseudonym of Jack the Ripper. Leather Apron is going to come up more than once. When I was first reading about the Ripper case 2.5 years ago, it was my understanding that Leather Apron was one of the unofficial names of Jack the Ripper, but then I saw that Leather Apron was an individual suspect, and even if you go over to jacktheripper.org, you'll see that Leather Apron was included as a suspect in the polling, like asking people, who do you think Jack the Ripper was? Some people believe that Leather Apron is an unidentified suspect, that we don't even know the person's name, so there are almost two mysteries: who was Leather Apron, who was Jack the Ripper. But as far as Nathan Kaminsky goes, there's a researcher named Martin Fido who believes that Leather Apron and Nathan Kaminsky were one and the same. Cohen was born in 1865, not actually named as a potential suspect in the Jack the Ripper case until Martin Fido's book came out, The Crimes, Detection, and Death of Jack the Ripper, which was published in 1987, almost 100 years later. The book detailed Cohen's alleged erratic and violent behavior, which made him a good fit for the killer's profile. I did one episode on Aaron Kosminski as a suspect, and the thing that stood out to me the most was there was this discrepancy about when Aaron Kosminski died, and that was that some were saying he died in the late 1800s, and there was another account that says that Aaron Kosminski died in 1919, and I thought that would be a rather easy thing to clear up. But as we see here, that Nathan Kaminsky, again, Kaminsky, not Kosminski, Nathan Kaminsky is taken to an asylum, and then he is the one who's going to pass away shortly after that, and passing away in the late 1800s. So after the psychiatric incarceration and of Nathan Kaminsky, the Ripper crimes seem to have ceased, more or less. As per an 1895 article by Sir Robert Anderson, who was the Assistant Commissioner, CID at Scotland Yard at the time of the murders, it became apparent that the killer was in fact identified by a witness. The witness, however, refused to come forward in an official capacity, leading Anderson to write, "The only person who ever had a good view of the murderer unhesitatingly identified the suspect the instant he was confronted, but he refused to give evidence against him." Later in the 1910 book, The Lighter Side of My Official Life, Anderson published a memoir handwritten by ex-superintendent Donald S. Swanson, in which he named Aaron Kosminski as the suspect who matched the description of that. And the passage reads, "The suspect had, at a seaside home where he had been sent by us with difficulty in order to subject him to identification, and we knew he was identified." Okay, so Aaron Kosminski was a Polish barber, and as you see here, also Jewish. They had similar names as well, so could that lead to a case of mistaken identity? There was one major problem with the timing of the events that took place, and the fact that Kosminski did not die until March 24th of 1919. And as I said, that's something that seems to be cleared up very easily. It was Kosminski who died in 1919. And Martin Fido proposed that the person who died shortly after the Ripper crime stopped was Nathan Kaminsky, who was admitted to Colney Hatch Asylum in 1889, and in fact, Aaron Kosminski did not arrive in the asylum until 1891, almost 2 years after these events took place, so that could be an explanation there all the same. And the reason why there was this confusion is because, once again, Nathan Kaminsky was admitted there under the name of David Cohen, which was not his real name. I can understand that Colney Hatch is an asylum, but some of you might be wondering, okay, well, if these guys are so mentally disturbed that they have to be incarcerated, how did someone get away with the Ripper crimes? And it's simply, the explanation that's been provided is an escalation in mental deterioration that, okay, no matter who the Ripper was, the theory is that someone was mentally unstable, but still had some awareness of his mental faculties. That's the way he was able to avoid getting caught. The ability to commit the crimes, a very deranged and twisted person, but also had the awareness to slip into the shadows, or when a threat would be approaching, he had the ability to either run away or change his behavior to a certain extent. So the whole point of still being aware of what he was doing, up until the point, let's say perhaps 1889, when his mental state got so bad that he had to be incarcerated in an asylum. So believe it or not, I can follow that narrative. But also, as to why are there so many Jewish and East European suspects, I just want to address that very quickly. And that's heavily ties to a message that was written on a wall called the Goulston Street Graffito, and it simply says, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." And let's just give a very brief rundown of that. It's the Goulston Street Graffito was a sentence that was written on the wall beside a clue in the 1888 Whitechapel murder investigation. It has been transcribed in variations as, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The meaning of the graffito, and it's possible that the Jack the Ripper crimes have been debated for over a century. So there could also be other reasons why people are looking at Jewish suspects. And I said this in the last episode, but some people have been using this as an opportunity to share anti-Semitic things in the comments section. And if there's any type of discriminatory comment that is going to be shared, that will be immediately removed, and the user will also be banned. I don't want to see that down there, please and thank you. But also, why do these things happen? Is it simply just because there's a sentence written on a wall that is poorly written and talking about the Jews? No, I don't think so, actually, because Daniel Pipes, the historian, discussed this in his book Conspiracy from 1997, when he said that, well, why are these theories forming? Not the Ripper case, but dealing with just zoning in on how Jews can be connected to other conspiracy theories. And one reason is that a lot of them were just separated from other parts of society, particularly by language, and many Jack the Ripper suspects, including Aaron Kosminski and Nathan Kaminsky and even Louis Diemschutz, would have been fluent in other languages, particularly Russian and Yiddish. Russian for Louis Diemschutz, and they believe that for Yiddish for Nathan Kaminsky, as well as Polish. Aaron Kosminski and Nathan Kaminsky are both Polish. So you would have somebody who would be living in Whitechapel, living in London, but perhaps not completely well integrated into the communities in which he is occupying. I mean, someone who perhaps would stick more toward immigrant communities, or someone who is primarily operating in, let's say, a Polish language circle, and would not necessarily be easily recognized by people who are outside of that circle. And that could be another way that Jack the Ripper was caught. Okay, I mean, you can respond to that in the comments section any way you like. But I'd like to go over now to the casebook.org profile on Nathan Kaminsky. Born in 1865, died in 1889 of exhaustion of mania at Colney Hatch Asylum. His occupation was possibly a tailor. First suggested Martin Fido's The Crime and Detection and Death of Jack the Ripper in 1987. He had brown hair and brown eyes, brown bearded or unshaven. The name David Cohen is given to a suspect and is expanded and revised in a version known as the Polish Jew theory, which in turn is originating from three primary sources: the 1894 McNaughton Memoranda, which introduced Kosminski, that's Kosminski, not Kaminsky, as one of the three major suspects, stating that he was a Polish Jew and resident of Whitechapel. He had a great hatred of women, especially a prostitute class, and had a strong sense of homicidal tendencies. He was removed to a lunatic asylum in 1889. Ah, right, but this is the whole discrepancy that is making the statement that Kosminski and Kaminsky are actually different people. Information about the killer and the police's knowledge about his identity revealed by Sir Robert Anderson, Assistant Commissioner CID at Scotland Yard, show that it was a low-class Polish Jew, and his name could have actually been Kaminsky. According to these documents, we have a poor Polish Jew living in Whitechapel who had homicidal tendencies and a great hatred of women, and was confined to a lunatic asylum at the right time for the murders, and after the murders stopped shortly after. As a result, Swanson and McNaughton naming the suspect led to Aaron Kaminsky being the most popular Polish Jew suspect during recent years of Ripper studies, but research has shown that Kosminski, a former hairdresser, was a harmless imbecile whose guiding instincts told him not to accept food from other people or take a bath. He picked up food from the gutters and refused to work. I just have to throw that in there as a side note about Aaron Kosminski as a Jack the Ripper suspect. I did one episode on him, but yes, that is just a detail that I thought was somewhat of a standout, that Aaron Kosminski was a Polish barber by trade, but he did refuse to work. And I mean, I guess if someone is dealing with some type of mental health issues, that shouldn't be super surprising, but that's the explanation that they provided as to why Kosminski wasn't recognized more by people, because as it just said there, he was not working regularly and he's eating food out of the gutter. Fido, who originally set out to find someone called Kosminski, was supposed to have entered a lunatic asylum in the spring of 1889, according to McNaughton's account, couldn't find him. Instead, the name David Cohen appeared. In December of 1888, a young and confused Polish Jew was found rambling on the streets and speaking little but Yiddish, was brought in by the police to the Lehman station. Since he was uncommunicative, it was decided that he was unable to care for himself and he should be sent to a workhouse. Then he suddenly became violent and had to be brought in under restraint. Since he didn't give them a name or address, no one recognized him, and he was registered as David Cohen, which was supposedly a name like John Doe for East End Jews without known identity or next of kin. In the infirmary, Cohen proved to be too dangerous for the other patients and himself, and therefore was transferred to Colney Hatch, once again under restraint. He had to remain under constant observation due to his violent tendencies, and he was rambling and described as spiteful and mischievous. He spat out his food, and he had to be force-fed, tore down a lead pipe wire window guard in the yard, and was very destructive, kicked passerbys, and had to wear a strong dress in order not to tear his clothes apart. And he would have most likely been diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic today. That line is thrown in there, and I don't really have an exact comment on that. But the whole point is that Fido's research pointed toward a Polish Jew being called Nathan Kaminsky, who was a suitable candidate for Leather Apron, who lived in the Black Lion Yard, right in the center of the Ripper murders. In March of 1888, he had been diagnosed as syphilitic, meaning he had syphilis, at the Whitechapel Workhouse Infirmary, indicating that he would have been in contact with prostitutes, wherefore he was released and cured from his illness in the same year. After that, he disappears from the face of the earth, and no further records show. So, this is what they're trying to make the case that the reason why everything is inconsistent with Aaron Kosminski is because it was actually a different person, and that Aaron Kosminski was someone who may have been mentally deranged, but not dangerous to the same point of somebody such as Nathan Kaminsky. And I follow everything that has been established. Believe it or not, I do. I follow everything. But is that what really happened? I mean, you have to accept that a lot of these descriptions of Nathan Kaminsky are true. a lot of these stories that are not very well documented. They certainly don't have any video recordings of Nathan Kaminsky in the asylum and then matching him to other particular pieces of media. So I think that that's also a little bit hard to accept. There's one final source that I would like to read, and that is something that has been written by Jeff Cooper over at JackTheRipperMap.info. David Cohen, suspect, also known as Nathan Kaminsky. And there's a particular reason why I wanted to read this one, so you guys will see. David Cohen, possible real name Nathan Kaminsky, possibly also nicknamed Leather Apron. He was a poor Polish Jew who was confined to Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum around the time of the end of the murders. In December of 1888, a young, confused Polish Jew was found rambling the streets and speaking in Yiddish. Cohen was described as violently antisocial and had to be restrained for the safety of other patients, considered too dangerous for the infirmary. He was then transferred to Colney Hatch. Nathan Kaminsky was a bootmaker living in Whitechapel who had been treated at one time for syphilis. He could not be traced after mid-1888, around the same time that Cohen appeared. Cohen died in the asylum in October of 1889. Conclusion: it's highly unlikely that David Cohen or Nathan Kaminsky was Jack the Ripper. And that's the end of the post. And I thought that was so odd because, I know we're not dealing with the strongest pieces of hard evidence, but the fact that, number one, the timeline seems to match up. Number two, if it is true that this Nathan Kaminsky is David Cohen, that he is the Leather Apron, those would be strong pieces of evidence. I can only gather that this writer, Jeff Cooper, is making that statement because he is saying that it is unverified, that all of these stories are true, which was my own original doubt. But as far as a Jack the Ripper suspect, I actually think that Nathan Kaminsky is a rather strong one, and I've had expressed a lot of doubt about some of the other ones, Aaron Kosminski, for starters, as well as Charles Lechmere. There are very strong reasons to doubt them, and definitely when I did the suspect video on Louis Deemshoots, there are all types of plot holes in that particular theory. But I do think that Nathan Kaminsky is somewhat of a strong Jack the Ripper suspect if this issue about the timeline is true. And it isn't simply that, okay, he goes to the asylum and the Ripper crime stopped. No, it's that the observation that someone had a deteriorating mental state and became more vicious and more able to harm other people, and his homicidal tendencies and violent tendencies were getting out of control. Look at the Jack the Ripper crimes. Firstly, with the murder of Polly Nichols. Okay, she's killed and mutilated. Annie Chapman killed, mutilated. Then the Ripper murders 2 women in one night. The murder of Liz Stride and the murder of Kate Eddowes. Kate Eddowes is killed and mutilated. And then the murder of Mary Kelly, where she is mutilated in an eviscerating way. So that shows that somebody has very devious and destructive tendencies that are growing. Now, that's a possibility. I've told you guys very clearly what I think in the past. I don't believe Liz Stride was killed by the Ripper. I believe that the Saucy Jackie postcard that says double event tonight, the first one squealed a bit, and the Ripper couldn't do his thing. I believe that that was a forgery that was written by Frederick Best. I'm not certain of that. I lean toward that way. So that would mean that Liz Stride was almost certainly not a Ripper victim. But the other 4 women could very well likely have been murdered by the same person. And then you can see how the Ripper narrative got established, that you would have a journalist named Frederick Best who worked for the Star writing the Dear Boss letter, the first Jack the Ripper letter, in an effort to save his newspaper. And he is more or less just trying to draw attention to crimes that were widely publicized. If anything, from watching, again, channels like Jack the Ripper Tour and House of Lechmere, they show that even the murder of Polly Nichols was not only widely publicized, there was a very big inquest, and there were all types of reporters on the scene. Lots of people learned about this. It's not like some story that was just buried in the pages. It was heavily reported on. So then somebody like Frederick Best writes the Dear Boss letter, taking credit for it, and saying that, oh, I wanted to write this letter in blood, but it turned thick like glue. red ink will have to do, and then after the murders of Catherine Eddowes and Liz Stride, two murders that happened in the same geographic area, one with similarities to the Ripper crimes, one that did not, then someone wrote the Saucy Jackie postcard saying, double event tonight, and that's why there were two women murdered in one night. And then you have the From Hell letter, which could have been written by a different person, not Frederick Best. And Frederick Best did not confess to writing the From Hell letter in 1931. He only confessed to writing the first two communications, and I've talked about him a lot in other Jack the Ripper episodes. But that's honestly my take on the subject. I just thought it was so odd that that person concluded his post by saying that Nathan Kaminsky was most likely wasn't Jack the Ripper, not providing a strong reason, and I mean, I'm seeing some reasons to look more into Nathan Kaminsky rather than away from him. But what do you guys think? What do you think about Nathan Kaminsky as a Jack the Ripper suspect? And what do you think about this idea that the first two Jack the Ripper letters, the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard, were hoaxes? And the reason why is because the killer, there was a real spree killer, but he was actually a mentally deranged individual who was killing for no other reason than he is completely out of touch and out of connection with other people in society. And, like, he is just a deranged madman, more or less, whose mental state was deteriorating, and he's primarily operating in circles that are either Polish-speaking or Yiddish-speaking, and the majority of the residents of Whitechapel wouldn't be able to recognize him easily. What do you think about all of that? Please put your ideas in the comment section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there is always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.